meeting to order, and if you would rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, welcome everybody. This is Public Facilities, October 18th, Beaufort County, and we're now ready for the notification, and I assume, unless the clerk tells me differently, we've done the proper things with FOIA. And I look now for approval of the agenda with one change, and that is, since we have some folks here from the task force and you're at the end of the agenda, we're going to put you at the beginning of the agenda so you don't have to stay around, unless you're welcome to stay around. But with that change, I have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second?
I'll second it.
Any objections? Agenda approved. Okay. Now I'll open it up for citizen comments. And are there some folks here that would like to address us? And if so, we have 3 minutes, and we hold it to 15 minutes total. So we'll go ahead and the lady in the back. Come on up, introduce yourself, and let us know what's on your mind.
Hello, I'm Carol Crutchfield, and I am here again once today as a private citizen to speak about King George Road, which is on your agenda, in the Verdier View neighborhood. So to update you on what's happened since I was last here 2 meetings ago, I did receive a call from the chair of this committee, thank you, Mr. Rodman, to share with me the procedures on special task districts. I also received an email last Tuesday from Neil, I think he's online, about this meeting, informing me of this meeting and saying that letters were sent out to the property owners who signed the petition. I did not receive a letter, as I was out of town this weekend. I can't confirm if anybody else received their letter, but as of just a little while ago, it still had not arrived in the mail, so nobody knows about this meeting except for me. I see from your staff recommendations posted on the agenda that you all most likely will vote to deny our petition. In doing so, you are leaving it up to the residents to resolve an issue that the county has known about since at least 2012. No one owns the roads. You aren't collecting any tax money on these roads. Mr. Flewellen stated at that last meeting this was discussed that someone was paying taxes on the roads. Well, from what I can tell, no one is paying taxes on the roads. And I don't see anything about that in your write-up. So you want 79 residential property owners and 2 commercial property owners to clean up this mess that was created by a developer. You know, and I know, that's probably not going to happen. Not unless you, as a county, really step in and help us do that. I see that a nearby road that the county took over, Rainbow Road, is also on the agenda, and your recommendation there is to create a special task district. I'm wondering why we have a petition to accept roads into the county system if the answer is just to form special task districts. As you can tell, I'm frustrated over this issue. Nothing has changed since I first started inquiring since 2012. We don't know who owns the roads. County doesn't seem to be interested in finding out, and developers are not held accountable after they've completed most of their work. Promises are made that are not kept, and there's no accountability. So what does that say for all the developments happening now? What happens to them in 30 years? And I thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Anybody else? Is anybody online? Come on forward. Give us your name and tell us what you want to talk about.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Mack, MAC. I'm a member of Beaufort Trailblazers, but I'm speaking as a City of Beaufort resident. These comments are about the Green Street Gym. You know, the county's had 26 years of a go at it. You probably get a difference of opinion on how it's turned out. I just say that maybe you all should consider selling it back to the city where you got it from, or maybe see if the university is interested. I happened to be going by Burton Wells yesterday and saw the outdoor basketball court. It appears that they put some patches down and then maybe resurfacing it. So the Green Street Gym right outside is another outdoor basketball court. Those kids play on a surface that's all cracked up. I don't know if you have plans to resurface that, but that court's in high usage. And so there was a comment at the city when the Green Street Gym Task Force presented to the city. There was a comment by a county staff person that, I guess, making a correction that it was not the Green Street Gym is not a community center. It is, I guess, in fact, a Parks and Recreation Center. To some people, we don't care what you call it. So what really matters is what goes on in that building. I mean, shoot, if you want to sell it, I'll make you an offer. But I don't know if I want to spend that amount of money. But, you know, there's got to be more to this town than the Murdochs, Stewart, and the Trasks. So the kids want to play. It's not from lack of participation. So don't even try that. Give the kids back their town.
Thank you very much, and we don't comment ourselves at these, but the administration will generally follow up on the action. So thank you very much for your time. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to Jared's administrator's report. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Rodman, members of committee. So just a few updates. Again, we always have a lot going on PFC committee, but there's a lot of things that are going on inside the engineering division that are ongoing projects or upcoming projects that always don't make it to the agenda. So just want to give an update and a brief to that on a couple of items inside the engineering division. First, in transportation, so our 2018 sales tax, a few updates as far as where we are in that program and some of the upcoming items. We have 3 upcoming public meetings, all concerning our county pathway projects. So first one is our Aljoy sidewalk public meeting. Is scheduled for October 28th at the Bluffton Recreation Center. So we'll be discussing that. That is I believe the 4th or 5th meeting we've had out there regarding Aljoy sidewalk. The next one is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Drive pathway. That meeting will be held on November 4th at the St. Helena Library, and that'll be the first meeting out there. And then the Stewart Point pathway, public comments. We held a public comment or public meeting a couple weeks ago. We received comments and are continuing to receive comments until October the 20th. When those results, we'll be presenting those back at a public meeting forum on November 16th at the Whale Branch Elementary School. In addition, we also had 2 grant applications that we submitted previously, and just a quick update on those. 2 community development block grants were submitted. We've had some responses from the Department of Commerce that we've been working towards. The 2 applications are the Beaufort High School realignment on Ladies Island, and also the Stewart Point pathway that we just mentioned. We hope to have or anticipate hearing something back from CDBG in the next month or so. Secondly is the Ladies Island Corridor Improvement Raise Grant that we submitted for $25 million in regards to the improvements on Ladies Island. We submitted that, and that too we hope to hear something back in the November timeframe. So that is transportation. Capital projects. So EMS Fire Station 31, this is the Red Barn project. This project is now complete. And EMS, Phil and Donna, they're planning a grand opening, which is scheduled next week, October 26th at 10 a.m. So again, that's next week at the facility, October 26th at 10 a.m. So there'll be public notice of that as well. EMS Fire Station at Sun City. So that construction bid package was issued earlier in October. Bids came in on Friday, this past Friday, and we plan to bring a recommendation to committee hopefully in November timeframe, so November PFC. And lastly, in capital projects is the City of Beaufort tennis courts. There's bid package that were issued in October, and similar, hope to bring that in either December, if we have a meeting in December, or in January PFC meeting. Solid waste and recycling, decals. As of last week, we've issued 51,778 decals. Over the last 3 months, we've also been preparing a hard line for our decal implementation for November the 1st. We've utilized a temporary decal system using the green, yellow, red method to hopefully let folks know that, hey, November 1st, this is the hardline date. If you don't have a decal, you will not be allowed to enter the convenience centers. We've also been advertising on Praise FM radio, and also recently published a press release regarding this November 1st date. Lastly, with the airport, not this past weekend, but the weekend before on 10/9, the airport's department hosted their second annual Flying Frog 5K and open house at the Beaufort Executive Airport. We had a great turnout and a great showing. John finished well, not quite as well as his son, but he finished really well.
Being a good father.
Yeah, good father. I think he was letting him win. But anyway, we hope that all of you as council start getting your steps in, because we're planning for the 3rd annual next year, even better, bigger and better. We know we'll obviously provide a little head start to some of the committee folks that have a little many more years on the earth to make it fair, so Councilman Herbachon and Councilman Cunningham don't just catch up from the start. So we'll make sure it's fair for all, but everybody get your steps in so we can see 11 council members out there running next year. But that's it as far as updates. I'll gladly take on any questions.
Questions for Jared? And if I don't see you on screen, just speak up. Just one for me. I did put my decal on the car Saturday and it worked.
Good. Better late than never.
When we were going through this originally, there was a category of properties where I think we had like 2 or 3 people living in one unit that might have been classified as a commercial. Did that all get resolved, do you know?
Yeah, so anything for a quadruplex or less was considered residential. So we were able to work that out. We had a few one-offs that we had to coordinate on a one-on-one basis. But once we kind of got through a few of those that were one-on-one situations, that we really hadn't had much issue since then.
And I've been approached by a couple nonprofits that question whether or not they could get a decal. So for example, some of the thrift shops that take goods in, and some of them they just have to throw away and they have to take them to the dump. Now you might ask the staff if they could take a look at whether that is a category that we might also consider either selling or giving decals to.
Sure.
Okay.
Just a quick question, Jared, on the convenience center, how many residents have not gotten their decals? Do you have any idea?
Yeah,
Is
there's
it
a
small amount.
Well, I mean, there's a couple hundred that we have out there. We at first, once we had the initial push, we had up to 3,000 decals that had not been delivered, and we've been whittling that down. A lot of those were kind of one-on-ones that we had to. Out of that 300 or so, there's some of those that are no's. So we've kind of tabled them, but basically somebody's tried applying and they just don't qualify. So that 300 isn't the actual number, because some of those are actual no's.
Okay.
If that helps. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
But yeah, over the last 6 months, that's another reason we've kind of postponed this hard date, is because again, we had 3,000 that we kind of had to use manpower with, and we've been whittling through those little by little. So now we're at a level where we feel comfortable with it.
Could you give me a number of no's that are in my district?
Yes, we can get staff and get that to you.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Jared,
Yes, sir.
this is Councilman Dawson. Initially, we had some hiccups with the heirs property process of the tax notice going to one of the heirs and the other heirs not actually having the opportunity to get the decal. And I know in working with Cindy, we've been able to work through that process. How is that at this stage in the game? How's that working out?
Yeah, I think we're in pretty good shape. Basically, that's been the one that's been a hand-on-hand process. So as those come up, we'll call the individual that's applied. First, it'll be flagged that it doesn't show up on our system as a straight and easy one. So we'll call and follow up. And assuming we can get a hold of that individual to talk through the process, we'll go ahead and manually enter that decal in that situation. Our only problem's been when we've got the contact information and tried calling and following up and haven't been able to reach the individual. That's when we've had difficulties. But otherwise, we've been working through it.
All right, if you would, then I'd be happy to assist in that process if you would send me a list of property owners in my district that are not responding, and so that I can communicate with them personally
Okay.
to see whether.
Yeah, I believe Cindy has that list, so we can get both those to both of you.
All right, good enough.
Jared, thank you very much. Okay, next on is, we have a presentation from the Charles Lynn Brown Community Center Task Force. Come on up and tell us what you got on your mind, and we look forward to hearing from you, and welcome. I'm glad we could move you up so you don't have to wait around.
Yes, sir. We appreciate that. Good afternoon. I'm Mitch Mitchell, City Councilman, City of Beaufort. I'm here with Ed and the rest of some of our task force members. We're all identified by our task force T-shirts, of course. I want to thank the county, especially Eric Greenway for being a part of this task force. So the task force was organized to basically determine how we could revive the Charles Lynn Brown Community Center, aka Green Street Gym, as previously referred to. So we did a survey so as to gather as much objective information from the citizens in the city of Beaufort as to what that center should be. We started our work back in June, did some footwork out actually door to door, as well as online survey, and we got almost 495 responses, which I'm told is pretty good. I'd like to thank the city of Beaufort for the logistical and administrative support that the city provided. Also, I'd like to mention for the record that the city of Beaufort realizes that we, the city, do not have jurisdiction over the Charles Lynn Brown Community Center or Green Street Gym. However, that facility primarily serves or will serve the core of the city of Beaufort. And as we looked within that core, what was very absent is any facility that could serve as a refuge or a place where children can go to feel safe. And that is what motivated us to do the survey. I want to pay, and also I'd like to say that I'm not here in any official City of Beaufort capacity. I'm here as a member of the Charles Lynn Brown Community Center Task Force. But I want to especially recognize Eric Greenway. We were very concerned as to who would represent the city on the task force. And after repeatedly, well, maybe not repeatedly, but a few times asking for that representative, Eric said he would be that representative, and he has truly been a full participant in the survey and helping to facilitate the way ahead. So again, thank you very much, Eric. So at this time, what I'd like to do is hand it over to our chairman, Ed Allen, and he will do the briefing on the results of the survey. Again, thank you very much.
Ed, good to have you with us.
Good afternoon, dear Mr. Chairman, members of council, those present as well as those that are online. As Councilman Mitchell said, I want to thank not only Mr. Greenway for participating with the task force. Not wearing his shirt today, but we'll excuse him on that grounds. Also, Councilman York Glover was there, and the staff of PALS. We had a couple of events that we did, and we received participation from it. Now, as Councilman Mitchell has stated, the main objective of the task force was to try and see if we can revitalize the Green Street Gym, as commonly known, but the Lynn Brown Center as formally addressed. The survey, we did it with participation from the City of Beaufort Police Department. They had a chill with the cops, and we attended 2 of their functions. One was at the Pigeon Point Park on July the 23rd, another at the Washington Street Park on July the 30th. Then we as said, we did a walk of the northwest quadrant. The members of the task force, along with some members from the Northwest Quadrant Neighborhood Association, and we gathered information from that survey so that it was trying to be as inclusive as it could be. This could not have been accomplished without the cooperation from both the City of Beaufort as well as Beaufort County. Yeah, next slide, please. The task force, as you can see, was very diverse. We went out, got to meet the young people, the children, as well as the senior citizens in that Northwest Quadrant, and got participation from them. We were welcome. In some cases, they invited some of us into their homes, wanted to sit down and have some water with them. The task force was created on June the 22nd, and we went through until August the 18th. We had, next slide. We had participation, as you said, of 495 people. Now, when we think of that, they were not all residents of the City of Beaufort. Next slide. When we look at it, it's a unique situation that we have a building that was previously owned by the City of Beaufort and then sold for the massive amount, I think, of $1 to the county and to be utilized as a recreational facility. When we looked at participation in the survey, we had 70% that were residents of the City of Beaufort, because we asked, what neighborhood do you live in? If you know the name of that neighborhood, give it to us, as well as those that are not residents of the city. So we had about 30% that were non-residents of the city. Next slide, please. Looking at the cross-section of where some of these people came from, if the ones that are in large print are the communities that had the largest response. And so we had there from Mossy Oaks, the Old Commons, Northwest Quadrant, Battery Creek, Port Royal, and Burton as well, all participated in that survey. And that was the results of, as I said, with the Chill with the Cops slide. Now we looked at, next slide. We looked at the age group, and we were getting in 3 sections. The 0 to 18, and when we looked at that, we asked them, what would you like to see? And we divided up into fitness and sports, wellness, technical classes, as well as all of the above. And our largest participation or response back was from those wishing to have fitness and sports. Now, when as a correlation, we had a second group, the 19 to 54. And ironically, the response was basically the same. Their major concern was looking at fitness and sports, wellness, technical skills. We look at everybody now, you can't do anything unless you can operate a computer, physical, personal development, and crafts. So we're looking at this as being a all-around facility. We're fortunate in this respect that we have the brick and mortar is there. So we're looking at what can we do to get it back as a functioning part of the community. Unfortunately, the years it was being used by bridges, it pretty well blocked the community out of using that facility. So now that it has been returned to the county, we're looking at what collectively we can do to get that back as a functioning facility. We also looked at the age group of 55 and above. Again, looking at sports, fitness, wellness, technical skills, arts and crafts. Okay? So you take and look at all three of those groups together. It gives you an idea of what the community is looking to see what we can have back in that facility. Okay. Now, as we did the survey, we asked for those people that had a household with children in them, what do your child do after school? And looking at the ones that go directly home, those ones that play some type of a sport, have a part-time job, or go to after-school care. Now, we know right now, every place you go, you see signs out hiring. Everyone has positions open, including, the county. And one of the major obstacles we're finding out with some people is the fact that daycare or after-school care for my child. We used to think of lock-key children as being in the urban area, up in New York and the major cities, but we're experiencing that right now. Okay, so we're looking again at how can we fulfill that need and try and get some people where they would be able to return to work, but at the same time provide a service. We asked as we were going, would you be willing to volunteer to help out if we can get the Lynn Brown Center back open? Would you be willing to volunteer? And surprisingly, we have about between the 19 and 54 a response of about 50% that would be willing to come in and volunteer. That 55 and above, we're looking at about 42% that would be willing to volunteer. Now, we realize that the county with staffing would need to have some support in there, and we're looking at having the community involvement. So if we can recruit those individuals through a combined effort to come in and volunteer and assist the staff of PALS in reopening the center, then hopefully we have a group that we can call on that will do that. One of the things that someone mentioned is that the center is right near USCB, the dormitories, those young people over there don't have anything to do, that we could tap that source and get them involved in it. When we look at high school, especially seniors now, everybody is, when they look at their resume, what did you do in terms of participation in your community? And this could be a source that we could have some of those children in high school, coming in and volunteering also. We're concerned as to what would be the hours of operation. And we did that looking at mornings, midday, and evenings, as well as the weekends. So we know that morning hours, children are in school, but if you look at the senior citizens, having a facility that they could go in and have some socialization. We don't have a senior citizen center in Beaufort proper. Unfortunately, in my immediate family, my 94-year-old mother was attending senior citizens over at St. Helena. But with the pandemic and that center closing down, we saw the deterioration of her mental status from not being able to socialize. So it's important to our seniors to do it. And, when I think of myself, I'm approaching that era. So I'm going to need somewhere that I can go, to get it. Now, we'll look at the center and as being a place that we could bring both children as well as young adults and seniors together. I have spoken with the chief of police for the city of Beaufort. They are willing to participate with the closing of the theater here. They used to have a place they could have police movie club. The Lynn Brown Center would be an excellent place that could be utilized there. And when we look at what's happening in society now and some of the ill feelings that people have towards law enforcement, that's where they could bond and get to know them. Now, I have to do a disclaimer. My son is a deputy sheriff, so naturally I'm going to move towards anything that's going to make sure that we have a good community in which for him to work. The center as a whole, coming from the task force, and the task force is working towards getting out of a job. We realized that this was just advisory in nature. We are asking that, could have adequate staffing for the Charles Lynn Brown Center. Looking at having a partnership between the county and the city of Beaufort for that center. And also partnering with outside groups. I have received several calls and contacts from other groups that would like to come in and mentor the children after school. Right across the street is the Thumbs Up. They are now serving about 25 children, but they would like to serve more, but they have no space. If something like that could be worked together as a joint effort, we can address those needs, mentoring those children, getting their grades up and looking at it. We realize that the Senior Citizens Center is not a function of Beaufort County, but if we could work with the Council on Aging and have them to utilize that facility, if things could be worked out, that would be another area that we could utilize. And we already have done some things that ended up being good in terms of participation. We looked at the county fund day that we had on August 28th. Because of some logistical problems, we didn't get the word out as much as we wanted it to, but the children and adults were there. It was productive. We had the mayor of Beaufort came over with his children, a council member from Port Royal was there, Councilman Glover was there, staff members from PALS were there had it set up, and it worked well. So it is a viable thing there that we can get working if we get the support from county council, as we have obtained from city council, and cooperation and support from PALS to get it open and to have it open on a regular basis. And when we look at it, make it a full service center. Have any questions?
Ed, thank you very much. First, a question for Eric, if I might. Is this something that is ripe for discussion now, or is this something the staff needs to think about and bring us a recommendation? What's your pleasure on how we might best move this forward and think about it?
We as a staff, we have no problem with the recommendations. We're working through that stuff right now, as we talked about earlier in finance. Staffing these centers is problematic for us, partly because of pay, opportunity, and things like that. But we're also exploring with this and other groups throughout the county with implementing a active parks friends program. We have it for the passive parks right now, but we could have the friends of group for Charles and Brown, where they would enter into an agreement with us, and then we would allow them to use the facility to do events that we can't necessarily carry out through the county Parks and Rec program, because some of these activities, of course, are not recreational programs that Parks and Rec would be able to carry out. But we have their cooperation. We're going to continue to work on this. This is just more of information for you all. No need for you all to take any action. Just trust that I'm going to continue to work with the task force to get the center open and to offer activities there as we can bring things online. But we got to have staff first.
Recognizing that that's kind of where we are, and this will come back to us, I guess, in some form. Are there any questions or any comments from members? Anybody online?
I just want to thank
Go ahead.
the committee for a very thorough report showing the needs for opening up these centers. And although they're talking about the Lynn Brown, this could actually be replicated all over the northern part of Beaufort County. I can see the same issue on St. Helena. I can see the same issue in bigger state as well. So I just want to thank the task force for putting this together and giving us a glimpse of what some of the possibilities are out there for a community involvement. Thank you.
Gerald?
Yeah, so I echo what York just commented. I have a similar situation in the big state community where we're going through the same process. It's just that Lynn Brown is several steps ahead of us, and so we could just follow the county administrator's leadership and guide us all through this process to bring forth a final product that the county and the public and the private citizens in these various communities would be very proud of, to actually have the activities that they so desire in these centers. And I think Eric is taking initiative to work through this and get us to that point. So good job. Keep it up.
All right. Just to let you know, on October the 6th, Love House Ministry had a fun day for senior citizens. Well attended. They had some meals there for them. They played bingo. I did go by and really enjoyed seeing the seniors have a good time. One of them was a former teacher of mine, and she enjoyed herself. The Grant Family Foundation has paired up with Classic Cars and Trucks of Beaufort, and also the Beaufort Police Department on October the 31st. they're having a trunk or treat. The city is having something down at the Waterfront Park. That's gonna end at roughly 2 o'clock. At 2, and from 3 to approximately 7, they're gonna have a trunk or treat, looking at the parking lot at the Lynn Brown Center, as well as over by the basketball court. They've indicated they'll come and have candies they can give to the kids and all. And again, if you haven't picked up on it, looking at getting law enforcement involved in this so that we have that good relationship between our youth and law enforcement. So we do hope that y'all will take this into serious consideration, and we look forward to working with you and working ourselves out of a job and returning the Lynn Brown Center back to the community.
Well, Ed, thank you very much for taking the time to be here. And General, thank you for coming. And we'll note your comments about the administrator on his efficiency report. If there's
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for coming all. Next item, John, you got a couple of contracts for airport cleaning, I believe.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Just before I start, I have to tell you that the kid who beat me in that race, it still weighs on me, but I'm 4 times his age, okay? And he beat me by 4 seconds. That was it. And he hasn't eaten since. No, he's a good kid. He runs varsity cross country as a 7th grader. So
Good for him.
that's my excuse. I'm going after him next year. It might be full contact, I don't know. Okay, the 2 contracts you've got in front of you they're both for janitorial services at the airports. May seem kind of mundane, but that's a big deal at the airports, which both serve as gateways to our county. And of course, Hilton Head Island Airport serves as a gateway to the island. So very important scopes of work that are performed there. We put out an RFP in the spring and really didn't get satisfactory responses, so we kind of revised it and put out a second RFP during the summertime. And in the interim, we had 2 companies who fulfilled interim contracts, one at Hilton Head Island Airport, the second one at Beaufort Executive Airport. We had 6 proposals received. 2 of them were local, and then we had 4 that were non-local, one from as far away as Phoenix, Arizona, if you believe that, to bid on our airports. They had the option to propose on just one airport or both airports, and we did get a variety of that. Neither of the selectees was the high bidder or the low bidder, but they do, the ones that we have recommended fit in very well. The 2 companies that we recommended, one for Beaufort Executive and one for Hilton Head Island Airport, are both the firms that had the interim contracts during the summer. And we were glad that they bid on this because both of those companies demonstrated excellence during the summer. And as you know from our past discussions about the traffic going through Hilton Head Island Airport's terminal, it was a pretty busy summer. And so this company, which is a local and a minority-owned company from right down the street from the airport, did a fantastic job, really adjusted well. And frankly, as we're bidding this out, we had stakeholders in the terminal come to us and say, we really hope you can hang on to these guys. So they had a very strong vote of confidence on their side, and they've been performing very well. So with that, we do recommend to you the award of both of those contracts.
Any questions for John on the contracts? Seeing none, thank you. And we'll talk about 9 and 10. We'll vote on them all together. We have 2 change orders, which I understand were ones that were approved within the administrator's level, and then there's been some change orders to them, so they have to come back to committee. This is items 9 and 10, DNA Lab and Detour Road. Is somebody going to speak to those? Looks like Jared is.
All right, so items 9 and 10, these are change orders. Both of these contracts, first for the DNA Lab, was a contract, both contracts were established under the small A&E contract procedure, so 50,000 or less. These contracts in themselves are less than 50,000, but the overall contract's greater than, thus the need to come back to committee for approval. So the DNA lab is 100% complete. The sheriff's occupying the space. This change order is $28,400 for the engineer, Beaufort Design Build. That contract actually will come out of savings that we had in the construction contract, so there's no additional funds needed for that, but it will create their contract value greater than the $50,000, thus needing committee's approval. So that's item number 9. Item number 10 is for DETOUR road pathway. So we had a contract with a design engineer. This is the pathway out at the Well Branch High School. We're currently going to be constructing the pathway from where the county school district property is north to Seabrook Road. But in the process, that'll be an 8-foot pathway. There's a 5-foot pathway in front of the school, so we said, you know what, it makes sense to take that pathway out and replace it with the 8-foot so it's consistent with the new pathway. So we had a slight change order of $3,900, but that too brought us above the $50,000 threshold. So these are more accounting processes, but just both of these need committee approval.
Any questions for Jared on these two contracts?
Just a quick one.
Yes, sir.
Jared, the DNA lab, what took it so long?
Well,
Just curious, that's all.
we had a contractor, out-of-town contractor, and they were managing it out of town and getting local resources to work on that. That was a little bit troublesome there. Also, they had some procurement issues with COVID, getting materials. So between the combination, we had some discussions. We had to bring the contractor in and get them back on track. So it was a lot of just contractor working with that particular It was a new contractor we've never worked with before. So all of that, after a while, we got on the same path, but there was a period of time where they weren't performing as they should have been.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Look for a motion for items 7 through 10 contracts.
Second.
Second, okay. Any objection?
No, but item 7 has to be moved to full council for
Yes.
approval because it's above that.
Right.
But 8, 9, and 10 can be approved by this committee.
That's correct. That is correct. Seeing no objections, these stand approved as, so the next one, while Jared's here, tell us a little bit about electric fleet.
Yeah, so this is just more of an update actually than a item for motion for action. So this is something we're working on. We started talking about this a few months ago as far as, hey, as we're updating and upsizing our fleet, would it make sense for us to think about electrification? It's definitely something that's caught momentum not just locally, but nationwide, all the way up to our president and Congress. So we said, yes, it's probably something we need to take a look at. And in doing so, we quickly realized that, hey, there's a lot of this stuff that we don't know. We don't have an expert on staff. Maybe it makes a lot of sense for us to get someone on board. So Neil Desai and our fleet services underneath Public Works is managing that project. He can gladly take another 2 sentences. If Neil, are you on?
Yes, sir.
You want to take another couple minutes and kind of describe where we are and what our plan of attack is?
Yep. So as Jared mentioned, about a year ago, we started looking at our fleet and maybe right-sizing it. Some of this research was conducted by in-house staff and myself. A very common theme that kind of we saw was the electrification of vehicles, both through municipalities and counties throughout the U.S. We just started to see that based on this electrification, it was a very involved process, and we determined that we kind of needed a consultant that kind of noted. In July of this year, we put together the scope for an RFQ for advertisement for the electric fleet transition assessment. 4 candidates applied, and the deadline for that advertisement was end of September. Top 3 firms were then kind of chosen for interviews. The interviews were conducted this past Friday, and then the final scores by all the evaluators are going to be sent to the procurement department.
So we hope to have a selection and then a recommendation of award to come hopefully in November, PFC.
Good.
To tell you about that consultant and then get started with that process.
Good. Any questions or comments for Jared on that one? We'll come back probably in a month to PFC.
Quickly, what is the feeling of the committee? Are you looking at 25% of the fleet being electric, or are you looking at 75% of the fleet?
Well,
being
it would be
electric?
for vehicles, service vehicles. So anything less than a pickup truck and below. So obviously not the larger vehicles. I mean, I think long term, as many of those as we can get electrified. So they're making F-150 Ford Lightning. So I mean, if that makes sense for us to look at, all the way down to our smaller SUVs and cars. So as many and as much as it makes sense that. So whether it's 25% or 75%, I don't know the exact answer, but as many as possible.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, let's move on to item number 12, which is Crystal Beach Lane. This has to do with a road right away.
Yep, so as you're aware, we've been working through for very many years now on paving many of our dirt roads. We have a lot of roads that are classified as legacy roads, so we've been working our right-of-way office. Normally, they work through about the projects that we have on our 5-year paving list ahead of that, as well as any stormwater projects, but in working with the property owners to perfect our right-of-way. So in this particular case, a individual reached out to us who lives on Crystal Beach Lane, which is off of Alljoy, and said, hey, we'd like to go ahead and deed this over to the county. So this resolution is to take control of that property. It's just for a section of the road that belongs to this one individual property owner, but when somebody comes asking for us, normally we're asking them, so this is kind of a shot to us that somebody came to us. So even though they're not on the road paving list currently, we thought it was worthwhile to go ahead and take ownership of that, complete title to that. So when the time comes, we don't have to worry about this particular property. So that's what this is regard to, and gladly take any questions.
Okay. Questions? If not, look for a motion to...
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Mark makes the motion. Somebody else? Second? York seconds. Any further discussion, questions? If not, any objections? This stands approved without objection. Next item has to do with an easement in Bluffton Township.
Yep, so this is the easement, working with Beaufort Jasper. They have a waterline project associated with some of their infrastructure off of Cassidy Drive, which is just off the Buckwalter Parkway. So this is a small easement across Cassidy Drive that we would be granting to Beaufort Jasper.
Any questions on that?
Move for approval.
Thank you, Gerald. Second?
Second.
York seconds. Any further discussion? Any objections? Stands approved as without objection. That brings us to King George Road.
So King George, this is the road Ms. Crutchfield just mentioned. So this project came to committee on August 16th. And at that meeting, council requested, or committee requested, that there be further research and investigation by staff. So we've looked into the road as far as the ownership and who owns that and what should be done. So I believe Brittany is online. If she is, she could provide more information. Brittany, are you there? I think she may be the phone call.
Brittany, can you hear us? Okay, apparently she can't.
All
Can
right,
you
well,
do it, or you want to come back
no,
to?
I'll stand in as
Okay.
best as I can. Anyhow, she was the one that did the research, and Neil, you may be able to jump in. I know you and Brittany have been working together, so if I don't get something right, please correct me. So anyhow, so this, again, legal looked into this, Brittany looked into this to find the true ownership. As it was identified, there was established a HOA. The HOA had since been dissolved, but at that time it was never dedicated over to anyone else at that time. The developer has long since passed. This is a paved road, as other roads in the neighborhood are dirt road. So to clear the road ownership up, the staff position would be that the subdivision recreate that HOA and then claim ownership. But until then, only the owner, as it's written in our own ordinance, only the owner of the said property can petition that a road be moved into county purposes. So another option in addition to that, whether the HOA be established or whether it be petitioned again at a later date, is that regardless of the ownership of the road, that there could be a special tax district formed, and through that, not only the residential but both the commercial, everybody who uses and accesses that road can come together and place a special tax district such that that road can be maintained or improved as needed. So per Public Works, they did an assessment which estimates about $50,000 worth of road work needs improvement there, including repairs, and about $20,000 of storm drainage work. So again, a special tax district would apply for that, and that could be done either by private work or by public contract at that point once created. So Neil, is there anything to add to that?
No, sir. I think you hit it right on the head and got everything right on.
And that work would have to be done before we would consider it, is that correct?
Brittany, did you speak up?
That's correct. I apologize. But yes, that is correct. I think the title needs to be clear before we can take on the road. And again, to reiterate Jared's point, it would have to be the owner of the property. And at this point, it is of the HOA.
Okay, so I think the issue on the table is that the 70,000 of work that would be required before the county could consider accepting it, and the path forward to that would be to reform the property association so that the work could be done. And one possibility for that would be a tax district mechanism.
That's correct.
Which we do from time to time in other areas for small roads. Questions for Jared, comments?
Yes.
Yes, Joe.
In the backup documentation, it shows the development. We're talking about the King George Road. What is the status of the other roads in there?
So there's two other roads that are paved, and then the last road, Loop Road, is dirt road. And to my knowledge, Brittany, correct me, but I believe all roads are private in that subdivision.
That is my knowledge, correct. Patty Wilson and engineering has been working on those, and I do believe that she has told me in the past, yeah.
And Brittany, if you can speak up a little bit, but I think we heard you there, but if you can speak up.
So King George Road is a paved road?
King George is, yes. It's about 900 feet, and then there's two small crossroads towards the entrance of the neighborhood, which are both paved. And then at the rear, at the end of King George, there's a loop road, which is a dirt road.
Okay, I see that. Okay, all right, thank you.
Jared, who now owns it? Has anyone been paying taxes on it as a private road, or is it right now it's just kind of out there? And
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's just kind of out there as far as I understand it.
Okay.
Yes. I don't know if that, if Ebony would know if taxes are being paid on that or not, but I'm not sure at this time.
Typically, property taxes in situations like this are de minimis, if anything, in these situations. We don't know who owns the road, and it's not our job as a county staff on behalf of private neighborhoods to determine who owns their roads. If they want us to get involved in something, as Jared said, then they need to do a certain amount of work on their side of the equation through private attorneys to work with us to determine what needs to happen. I would recommend that you all not do anything with just King George Road as is a recommendation by staff. Because if you do anything with that, then that's going to open you up to having to do the same, if not more, for the other roads in that neighborhood. Because once you take one, I guarantee you're going to get a request to take them all.
York?
Mr. Chairman, I want to echo what the county administrator just said, because if you do that for this community here, I'm going to ask you to do it for my community, and I got a lot of dirt roads, and I know you don't have the staff to do that kind of work. So what has happened in the past is the individuals who are interested in having that road either paved or maintained, they have been doing the legwork and bringing it to the county. And then once that has been taken care of and easements are signed, et cetera, then the staff will bring it to council for adoption. But if you're gonna open it up and do the legwork, I got some roads I can give you, man. Keep you busy. Thank you.
Other comments? So is the issue before us whether we deny this or whether we just leave it open for a period of time?
Well, that's how it came. So it was a petition initially in August, and at that time it was petitioned. So staff's recommendation would be to deny the petition based off the owner has to make that petition. And then should said owner claim the road and come back, then it would be reconsidered at a later time.
Okay. So is there a motion to deny this application?
Mr. Chairman, I would make the motion to take the staff recommendation at this time, which will allow the owner to even come back later. So I want to use that motion, if I could.
Okay. Second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objections? Okay, this is denied without objection. Okay, next item is Rainbow Road.
Okay, this is a similar issue, but a little bit different. And I'll try talking through it now that I have Brittany as backup. I'll lean on her. But so this road came to us. It is on our road resurfacing program. This is under our year 3, so Patty in our right-of-way office has been working on it. But as we were working through the road process and the right-of-way acquisition to make sure we're square prior to pavement and design, it was clearly delineated and identified that though we had been maintaining this for years and years under legacy status, that legacy status was not appropriate. That this did indeed belong to others, and that this should not be a legacy status road, nor should it be maintained further by the county, in our opinion. So with that, I don't know, Brittany or Neil, if you can provide more context than that.
I think you covered it as far as the county's position is that we do not have clear ownership to it, and being, like we were just discussing on the other property, being that we don't believe we own it, there is another party involved that does, and they need to go clean that up before we can proceed forward with our project plans.
We did have a brief meeting with Councilman Cunningham, whose district this is in regards to the road. So with staff and coordinate with Councilman Cunningham, our discussion was that we would suggest that we establish a timeline for the county to cease maintenance of Rainbow Road and then coordinate with a community meeting to let them know of said timeline. And then also that they, again, give them the opportunity to seek legal guidance, and then they could come back and petition or not petition, or a similar request for a special tax district to be to be created. This is, again, a dirt road, not a paved road currently.
And does this require any action on our part, or can you just administratively do it?
So the action would be that this is no longer on the year 3 resurfacing contract. we would replenish either another road, or actually this was going to put us above our yearly threshold. So the action would be to move forward in that direction, that we would take this off of year 3, and then also establish a timeline to cease maintenance of this road.
Okay. Staff recommendation, is there a motion?
Can I comment before we move forward?
Certainly.
So yeah, I met with Jared and some other members of staff, and Jared, correct me if I'm wrong. This came up because we were planning to surface the road. We're planning to put in a pavement, correct?
That's right.
Okay, so in the last time we met and we talked, our goal was to put the ball back into their court. Come to find out, there was supposed to be an HOA that this property is supposed to be given to. The HOA wasn't set up. So we were going to meet with the neighborhood to let them know, hey, these are the steps you guys have to take. We're giving you guys the time frame to take those steps and the opportunity to bring it towards us. We're just not doing the work for you. Is that correct there, that statement, Jared?
Yes, you're correct. And that may be more adequate, rather than the motion today, that we go back out to the community and let them know of our plan of attack, and then from that community meeting, it's in their court, or we withdraw the road at a later date.
Yeah, so the entire goal of bringing this up in this project itself was to actually get this paved. We come to find out legally we can't do that. So, I mean, I think we need to make sure that we still, what's our time frame to remove this from the paving of the road? Because it's already been approved to be paved. We've deemed it necessary as a county. This is on our project. We wanted to move forward with it. But now we just have to back this up to make sure that we can do it properly. So, yeah, like we talked about, we need to give them a deadline, because we can't be drug along. They don't want to be drug along as residents, just so we can get a clear-cut, concise plan here. But I think the ultimate goal is for them to make their own HOA and resubmit it to us, so we can get the easement to put that property, or to put that pavement down.
So are we basically at a point we ought to just hold this in abeyance until you have your meeting, and then bring back whatever you think we ought to do?
That might be probably the most worthwhile, based off, again, Councilman Cunningham and the discussion there.
Any objection if we postpone this?
I have a question.
Sure.
No, I don't mind holding off, but
go ahead,
I have
Brian.
a question. Are we talking about John's Farm? What's the name of the subdivision? With Rainbow Road?
Huggins. I don't think it's necessarily a subdivision. It's off of Gibbet Road. It's actually right down the street from that convenience center that we closed earlier this year. If you continue to go down that road, it's on the right-hand side.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. So any objection to holding this in abeyance and letting it come back after they've had the meeting? Seeing none, let's go down that path. That brings us to the
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The Buckwalter Access Management Program, which Jared can explain, which if I understand it, we basically have an ordinance, and we're at a point where we may be looking to amend it for some changes to the road network in that area.
Absolutely. So in 2007, we performed an access management study on the corridor on Buckwalter from 278 to the northern portion of Buckwalter, or Bluffton Parkway. And in that study, we identified what the development intersection locations would be, such that the development would build up to those intersections. It's been a long time, obviously, since that, 14 years since that was first identified. Excuse me, let me back up. After that study was performed, that was also later adopted in the Community Development Code in 2009. So the study was adopted through ordinance through the Community Development Code and referenced as such. So again, it's been 14 years since the study's kind of been looked at. There's been a ton of development in the area, and we thought it was fitting that, hey, let's see how this is performed and if there's any needed updates based off existing development and future development. So I have with us today Jennifer Beal with Beal Engineering. She's a traffic on-call consultant that we have that does a lot of traffic engineering work. Let me remind you, traffic and transportation are two different things. So traffic is the signal and how that functions, and transportation is actually the road design. So very similar, but a little bit different in their specialties. So she's a specialist in traffic engineering, And she did the study, and we gladly talk about this, and then I can get back up and brief from here. So, Jennifer?
Jennifer, welcome and welcome on board.
Hello, everybody, Chairman and rest of council and committee. So, as Jared said, we'll kind of walk through this pretty quickly. If you have any questions, feel free to jump in. But if we go to the next slide, as Jared said, the study area is this northern section of Buckwalter Parkway, so kind of just south of, so 278 is running up and down on the screen there, and Buckwalter Parkway that we looked at is running left to right. And so basically just south of 278 and just before the northern section of Bluffton Parkway. That's our focus area for this study. And so in 2007, next slide will show it was done, and this is on two sides just to kind of get a little clarity from some older graphics. But basically it looked at, okay, what can we do on this section of Buckwalter Parkway, and where would the access points be? So this just kind of shows you what it used to look like in 2007, and then the next slide will show the southern section. And so what we did is we looked at this layout, and then we also looked, as Jared said, we looked at traffic volumes, we looked at crash information from Bluffton PD, we looked at what the development patterns are, where some of the ecological features are, such as wetlands, and looked to see, okay, does it still make sense on what was in 2007, and then also looking at the goals that were set forward in the Community Development Code of what kind of spacing are we looking for maximum efficiency of the corridor? Because that's really what we're looking for, is what's the maximum efficiency for the corridor, and with these development patterns, does it make sense to have the signals and the access points where they are shown in 2007? So on the next slide, the CDC outlines actually the major intersections at the time, all the way down to actually 46, but it identifies kind of where they are. But it does outline, we want about 2,000 feet of spacing between signalized intersections. So that's a little bit more than what the DOT looks for, but that kind of help with that efficiency. And then for additional locations, do we want to do, we want to look at 500 feet, we want to look at cross access, in some cases it'll be 800 feet. But looking at where these right in, right out and other access points may be located. So we kind of took the 2007 report, we took the CDC goals, we took the existing traffic and development patterns and kind of came up with an alternative on the next slide. And so basically we had the first scenario there, and we've been showing kind of different ways to show this because there's a lot of intersections, but these are the main intersections, starting at 278 going down to Buckwalter Place, which is the small right-in driveway right before you get to Bluffton Parkway, the northern section, and basically have a scenario 1 and a scenario 2. So the current signals today stay where they are, and it's looking at where we are kind of as we go down. So we start at Cassidy, that's the new roadway we just kind of spoke about on a previous item, looking at that coming right in, right out, and then we have the two Pinellas Drives where the movie theater, Sea Turtle Cinemas is located, and that's where we started to see some changes in where we could put the signalized locations. And so previously in the 2007 plan, it was on the southern location, and in looking at spacing and everything, in the 2021, that actually moves up to the northern intersection. Now, some of these are going to need some additional roadway improvements as well, but having it at the northern Pinellas Drive location allows you to actually have it at the Parkside Drive location where Woodbridge is located, and that had been previously down at Ludlow, which is the next one down, and it had a connection into the neighborhood that has never happened, and the neighborhood's not really designed that way anymore. And so kind of using as we kind of go down, and then you would create in the 2021, the current plan we're showing as scenario 2, you would have that signalized intersection actually up at the Kroger Fuel driveway and then tie into some cross access. So this kind of, we can go back to this, but a picture probably shows a little bit better if we go to the next slide. And this should show the kind of the northern section. So we've got 278 there running north-south on the page there. As we start to go, those gold lines are potential for cross-access. They don't represent any specific roads, but basically what kind of connectivity do we want to try to get so that people use those roads instead of Buckwalter Parkway, and start to, as some of these areas continue to develop, make sure that we're really pushing that cross-access and this connectivity. Because what we try not to do is have somebody jump on a road for a couple hundred feet to then duck right back in. And there's been a lot of planning because of the 2007 plan. There has been some planning for that in these neighborhoods or in these developments, but we can continue to improve that as we go. So this shows the location with the red circle where you would have in the scenario 2, you would have that signal would move up, and then also at the right of the page you can see where it's at Mott and Parkside. Next slide shows the lower section where you're tying into where we got Buckwalter Place, where you've got, instead of being at Ludlow, which is that first intersection that says RIRO on this plan, which is right in, right out, that was where it was originally planned. If you can kind of see, that was going to be the original full access that was just going to go straight into the neighborhood, which if you can kind of see from the top there, doesn't make a lot of sense now with the current development, current way that was designed. And then we continue to move to the south there as you get towards Bluffton Parkway and have those cross-access connections and then tie-ins to the signalized locations. And so what the access management plan does is basically break this down in a lot of detail. And the next slide kind of shows how between the two plans, we're getting a lot closer to that 2,000. So this first one, the scenario 1, shows you that there's a couple spots where we're not quite at that 2,000. And even in scenario 2, we're not, just because of where they're located, but we're a lot closer to that 2,000-foot goal spacing with the scenario 2, and that seems to make sense with the development patterns that we're seeing, and the analysis shows that it would operate well in the scenario 2 would also operate well. So really fast version of an access management plan. So does anybody have any questions?
Great job. Did I interpret correctly that you would still have 3 signaled intersections between 278 and Bluffton Parkway, but they would just be at different locations?
Slightly different locations.
Slightly different locations. And this is something that has to go back through ordinance, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, so the motion in this scenario, since it was an ordinance through the development code, this would be to amend that existing ordinance to include this updated plan. So it would go back to full council and in 3 readings and a public hearing.
Okay. Let me open up for questions that people may have relative to this access management plan.
Just a couple questions. Back in October of 2007 was the initial access management plan that was done by SRS Engineering. Does SRS Engineering still exist today?
They do not. They're common. They've kind of moved on to different firms.
Okay. Then, based upon that study, we did have the ordinance in 2008 that had the access management plan adopted. Now what we are doing is saying, okay, based upon what actually has happened over the course of time, we want to alter that plan by putting lights in between 278 and the Bluffton Parkway, not as what was proposed back in 2007 and adopted by council in 2008, but what we feel we need now.
So,
is that a fair
so the traffic
presentation?
It's the same number of traffic signals. It's just
in
different locations.
Locations. Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay.
Other questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Yes, Logan.
One question would be on the process of this. So let's say we accept this access management plan. Before any of the roads on that get approved, does that still have to go through council for approval?
Yeah, so the access roads or the signals, or what are you referring to?
more of the roads than the signals?
Yeah, so, these are just the actual plan and layout. So anytime we did anything, whether it was us or a private developer, whether it's Town of Bluffton, all that would come back through council before any of those projects would come to be.
Perfect. Just making sure we're on the same page. Thank you. I think I'll save my next questions for the next.
This is also, excuse me, I'm sorry. So in coordination with this action, we are coordinating with the Town of Bluffton and coordinating with their staff. We've reviewed it with them with favorable comments. They approve all the updates as far as locations. So they too will adopt it. They said, I spoke to Heather Collin that they would need to adopt it just via resolution, but they'd probably wait towards the end of our amendment process. So that's where the town is as well.
Okay, Brian?
Thank you. I'm just like the next matter on our agenda. I'm not inclined to do an awful lot for the town of Bluffton until they adopt our impact fee structure for the school system. So you can count on my no vote for any of this.
Okay. Any other comments?
Brian, if I could comment on that just for a moment. I'm with you 100%, which you're going to hear shortly after this next one. I think this access management plan does help better with the signalization, which is better for those residents at some are county, some are Bluffton. That's why I specifically asked the question about the roads itself, because I have a problem with the roads. But I do think the updated traffic signals on this map are more beneficial for Buckwalter. It's my personal opinion. And Jared, if I'm correct, this study is on the traffic signals, not the roads itself.
That's correct. So this is Buckwalter, a county-owned road, and the signals that we own and maintain along that corridor.
Yeah, I'm with you on that next one we're about to talk about, Brian, on the road. I just wanted to clear that up. If that changes anything in your mind, if not, I totally understand.
Well, it does, Logan. I appreciate that. Let me ask Jared to make sure I get it from the horse's mouth. Does this change the signal at the towns at Buckwalter?
No. So in this study, we basically recreated what was done in 2007, and it stops at that towns at Buckwalter signal. So we didn't adjust anything. We didn't adjust anything in this plan with that signal because that was the terminal location. So this is separate than the next item on the agenda.
I appreciate it. Okay, I'll say yes then. Thanks, Logan. I appreciate you convincing me otherwise.
Okay. Looking for a motion to approve and send this on. I believe this would be ordinance to amend.
That's correct.
I'll motion.
Who's that, Logan?
Yes, sir.
Okay, second. Brian, second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection? Okay, it's approved at committee level, forward on to county council for an adoption or an amendment to the original ordinance. Thank you very much. Okay, that takes us to the next interesting one, which is the intersection discussion, and should comment as we open this up that it was a very good community meeting last week, and I thought Logan and Jared both did an outstanding job of explaining what was going on and fielding the questions, and it was a very orderly discussion, and I thank both of you for that.
Thank you, and I appreciate Councilman Goodenham for leading that. Just to lead into that, so this is in discussion of the Buckwalter Bluffton Parkway, now referred to as BP squared, or at least I refer to it. You can refer to it as you desire, but I kind of like it. So BP squared intersection discussion. So just some background on where this is. So this project was commissioned in August or September last year. It was discussed at PFC. It was approved that we would put $2.5 million of impact fees towards the relocating the signal at the petition of the town of Bluffton. So we were moving forward that as staff. At that point, that was just, we did not move forward to county to have council action, but it was enough to get us started on the preliminary engineering. So with that, we coordinated with HDR, who actually was the previously engineer on the road design plans. And so we coordinated with them, and they helped us draw up 4 different options of access, because once we moved this, even though it seemed simple, and I apologize for anybody that came to the meeting on Thursday, and this sounds completely repetitive. But anyhow, just for full council and committees knowledge, just a debrief of where we are. So anyhow, it seems simple on paper that we're just moving an intersection and that's it. We're all done, no big problems. But when we do that, we start affecting access to different properties, and specifically the town's subdivision is probably the most impacted in this. So we drew up 4 different options. I actually presented those options to town council about a month ago, a little over a month ago, and out of that had good fruitful discussion. And they actually came up with some ideas and maybe some even phasing, which we drafted as a 5th option. So I'll speak to that 5th option at the end as well. But if you just bear with me, I apologize. Some of the colors don't show up as bright on the screen, but hopefully you can see them, and I'll try to describe them as best as possible. So the first option is option A. This option is trying to provide the intersection realignment as well as the limited, this is the smallest impact as possible. What you'll see on all options, first let me go back and describe this, is you'll see the relocated intersection, and then you'll see the old roadbed that will be demolished as part of the project. Additionally, whatever we do, it's going to impact the signal south of this intersection at the Parkers, thus making it important that we provide dual access to the Sandy Point and Lake Point neighborhoods to the south. So each option will show not only the intersection relocated, but the north-south addition. There's about 500 feet for those neighborhoods to access Bluffton Parkway. So that Independence Boulevard will be included in all options. Also shown, just as a frame of reference on all options, is what you see there in the red, 2 lines to the red that are going east-west beyond the intersection. So as everybody's familiar, this was a part of a larger project known as 5B, but we're specifically talking about the intersection west of Buckwalter. But just for frame of reference, this does align with the previously designed plans that we have a 70% design that was completed and thus set on the table once the project was unable to obtain funding. So that's just for frame of reference to let you know that this is in alignment with that. Should there ever be another project, that's just good future planning as far as transportation, but just for reference only. So in this option, again, we're relocating the driveway, and the towns currently has a full access, so they have direct access to a signal where they can turn left and right freely. In this option, their access is turned into a right in, right out if you're headed north, and then only a left in. There is no left out of the subdivision. So to make up for that left, the residents that live in the neighborhood would turn to the north up to the signal at Publix, and we would provide extra space at that signal for those residents to make a U-turn movement. So again, this is less access than they currently have, which we recognize, but this is also the least costly of all the options. So that is option A. If there's any questions specific to A, if not, I can keep going to option B.
Jared, also in that option is Innovation Drive Extension. Is that part of this?
That's correct. So all 4 options, 5 options will show that extension, because once we move this signal, there's some impact to the signal below at Parker's. So we're providing dual access to that neighborhood. So every option shows that Innovation Drive extension. Yep.
Okay. And if I'm, where it shows Lake Point Drive down at the bottom there?
Yes.
That also has to have road work done across the street?
So not in this option. This option is the base option. So as little of work as possible to make this intersection project come to life. So there's no planned extra work at Lake Point Drive or north at the self-storage center. There's no extra road work in that vicinity in this option.
And that is a signalized intersection, correct?
That is correct. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions on option A? All right, option B.
Jared.
Yep.
This is Chuck Valentino. I'm listening in, and I appreciate your comments. How do we get back into our subdivision?
Into which subdivision?
I live in the towns.
So there is a left in if you're coming from north to south. You can take a left in this option. Or if you're coming north to south, you would continue to have that right in option.
What if I'm coming east off the Parkway, Bluffton Parkway?
East off the Parkway, you'd have to turn left up and north onto Buckwalter and then right into the neighborhood.
Okay, is that traffic light going to go away?
The existing traffic signal would go away with the relocation, and it would be relocated to the new intersection.
Yeah, but you just approved a traffic management plan that said that light would stay.
Well, it wasn't considered. It would stay. The signal will stay. It would be relocated. So there is still a signal in the vicinity. But in this project, separate from the access management plan, is that it would be relocated.
Yeah, but that's.
Yeah, let's let we're not really in public comment here or questions. So let's let Jared go ahead.
All right, Tiffany, if you can go to option B, please. All right, so option B, and if you can zoom down just a little bit. And maybe zoom out a little bit. Sorry, I'm being picky. All right. So option B is the same alignment with the new intersection as well as the Independence connection. But in this one, now the intersection at the towns is fully a right in, right out with a median converted. But as you can see, coming from the driveway into the towns, they now have a northern access, which gets them back to the signal, if you pan to the north a little bit, back to the signal at the Publix light. So their full access that they once had is brought back in this scenario. So now, should they choose to take a left onto Buckwalter Parkway, they could go up to that light and then take a left. So again, in this scenario, no work down to the south at the Lake Point Drive at Parker's. This just basically provides an alternate access to the towns rather than the U-turn movement in the previous option. Any questions on B? All right. Option C. Tiffany, if you can go to option C. All right, so these start building, you'll see this pattern, they start building off one another. And obviously the more roads we build, the more costly it is. So same thing, the intersection, same place. Independence is the same. We maintain the northern access with, as shown in option B, but then we start to introduce a southern access. Out of the towns, you could turn left into the southern access, and then we start doing some other things to the signal down to the south at the Parkers. So if you can scroll down just a little bit more. So in this option, as mentioned before, currently we have a spacing, or maybe I didn't mention it, but currently we have a spacing about 1,100 feet from the public signal to the existing location. When we move the intersection, we get to 1,600 feet. However, we currently have 1,600 feet from the existing intersection to the Parker signal. So when we move the intersection to the south, we reduce that to about 1,000 feet. So we're just kind of swapping the distances from one another. So what this does, similar to the access management plan we just discussed, this recaptures our spacing, our preferred spacing. So in this segment, we push the signal down further, which gets us closer to the cross church. And then provides adequate spacing not only from 278 to the northern Bluffton Parkway, but actually to these signals and beyond to the southern Bluffton Parkway. So that's the main difference in option C, is that we provide not only a northern access, but a southern access to the towns. And then we also show the relocated signal at Parker's. So are there any questions on C? All right, and option D. All right, so option D builds on what we just saw. So same thing, we have northern access and southern access out of the towns. We start to have interconnectivity. And if you'll scroll down to the south and to the bottom and to the right a little bit. So we also show, similar to C, the relocated intersection at Parker's. So the difference in this option is that we do connect to the cross school. And again, we would coordinate with the school or any property owner that we cross upon as part of the project to make sure it facilitates with their existing site plan. So they would gain access to a signal, which they currently do not have. And then we also would start to make a connection up northerly to what's at the top right of the page, which is the rear entrance of Woodbridge. So Woodbridge currently only has one entrance, which is further up on Buckwalter. But this would provide a second entrance to Woodbridge. That, excuse me, that wooded parcel there actually belongs to the HOA. So it's an undeveloped lot, and it would be connecting in. Again, they would require their approval with the subdivision. But what this does is gets access, dual access to not only the Point and Sandy Point and Lake Point neighborhoods, and not only dual access to the towns, but also dual access to Woodbridge. In order to get them access, we already also provide them back access to the other signal. So basically they could, the east-west road that's in the old 5B alignment, they could stay off of Buckwalter should they choose and get all the way to the Publix Kroger Shopping Center through the series of access roads in this option. So again, option D builds off C and then provides further access to Woodbridge and the cross. Any questions on option D? All right. Lastly is option E. And sorry I don't have good names besides A, B, C, D, E, but it's what we got. So this is basically similar to what we just saw in option D. The only difference is a little bit in some alignment down between the two properties there at the towns and Woodbridge. And then also what you see in the hatched area is some phasing as suggested by the town. So obviously the town liked all the access management, but did recognize that $2.5 million probably isn't going to go that far. So how could we start breaking this up? So first, let me explain the roads. The only difference between D and E, so if you can zoom to the bottom and to the right a little bit, is they said it makes sense doing the access, but why don't you connect the access road between Woodbridge and the towns all the way back to the relocated intersection? And then why don't you use, that could be a 2-lane road versus a 4-lane road as described in the 5B project. But it would be an access road for those neighborhoods specifically and get them directly back as close as possible to Bluffton Parkway. So that's the main difference in the road network. Also, what you see is an extension beyond the page there to the right, if you can go as far as you can to the right, Tiffany. So what they suggested is that, hey, when you're looking at this, why don't you also extend the 2-lane road, not just beyond the Woodbridge north-south connector, but to further distance. And what they were describing is there is a tract also known as Willow Run that most people are probably familiar with, but inside that development agreement is a requirement by the developer that they would build a north-south road to this road location, formerly known as 5B. So they said, while you're looking at this, what about if would it make sense for you to extend not just to the intersection and not just to Woodbridge, but to this future north-south? So they asked that it be shown, and that's the reasoning behind this. Also, let me, I guess, speak to the phasing. So again, if you can kind of back up from everything so we can look at the phasing. And these were comments, like I said, this is option E, comments that were received when I presented to town council a month ago. Just excuse me for a second. So in their phasing, they suggested, as we mentioned in all the options, yes, absolutely, Independence Boulevard and the relocation, those absolutely make sense. Also, what makes sense is some improved access to regain direct access to a signal for the town. So they kind of highlighted the northern section. Then phase 2 would be, and I don't know if I can see it. Phase 2 would be the section, what does it say, phase 2? Phase 2 is the southern, sorry, I couldn't see the highlight. Phase 2 is the section right there that would regain the access management standards on Buckwalter as far as moving that second signal. Stage 3 would be up to the north a little bit, so this would be the southern access from the towns back to the Parker's roadway. Phase 4 would be the Woodbridge connection, and phase 5 would be the north-south connection. So again, this was their comments to me as I made a presentation to town council, not to say that we're doing one or the other, but this was just expressing what the town had as comments. One other concept that I'd like to make mention off of this that made a lot of sense, this was a comment that was made at the town meeting on Thursday, is that rather than install the north-south or the northern connection to the towns as described in phase 3 or phase 1, would it make more sense to do the southern connection? So from the towns down to basically the self-storage and then directly back to the intersection. And that thought process was that if we're moving the intersection, there's no direct access to Bluffton Parkway east-west to get to 170. So would that make sense to install the section from the intersection to the southern entrance to the towns such that the towns can directly get on Bluffton Parkway and go to 170 without having to do a left turn or a U-turn or anything else? So that came up and thought that was a worthwhile comment at the Thursday meeting. So I know I just spoke a lot. That's probably more than you want to hear from any one individual. So I'll gladly turn that over and any questions that you may have.
Let me see if I could set the stage for, I think, what we need to talk about. It seems to me there's kind of 3 issues here. And I guess we are starting to see a lot of congestion in that particular area. We know a lot of growth coming in Bluffton. So to me, one question is, what is the best transportation solution? Secondly, whatever that one is, there may be some time phasing based on dollars. And third, there may be some political considerations, but what I would hope we would do is recognize that we can always revisit the political pieces as we go forward, but I think our job as this committee would be to zero in on what may be perceived to be the best or the preferred or the top 1 or 2. And I don't know if you're in a position to give your position as to what you think is the best alternative at this point? Or is that something you want to think about a little bit?
Well, let me think about it and I'll give you, as discussion comes, maybe what from an engineering standpoint, it would make a lot of sense. But let me think about that and give you a better answer in just a moment.
Okay, so let me open it up for discussion, and I know we're kind of running long, but Brian? You're still muted, Brian.
Thank you. This original topic came up in response to what I was told was a request by the Beaufort Memorial Hospital to provide access and to do some things with some property that they own in that area. I understand that's no longer the case. So why are we doing this? Why is this something we have to even talk about?
I don't know of the hospital piece. I know that it has come up. I don't know the status of it then or now.
I can tell you a little bit that I know, and I'll gladly let somebody with more history around the project answer. But this showed up in my lap as in the engineering department from a letter at the request of the town of Bluffton. At the time, it was given to Ms. Jacobs, and then put in front of me. It says, "Hey, brief counsel on it." In the letter that the town wrote, they did say that it was in effort to support the hospital. I have not had any direct communication with the hospital if it is indeed needed or not needed for their site plan. I personally don't know the status of their project or plan, but from an engineering standpoint, and this may get to what you were asking and referencing, whether the project is connected to any commercial update or not, as we just looked at the access management plan, the access management plan stopped at this signal. So if we take that same concept of what we're trying to update in the access management plan to regain proper spacing so we can maintain the integrity of this road in the corridor, then at that point it would make sense to look at moving the signal to regain. Currently we're at 1,000, which is less than desirable. But at that point we're making another situation worse by moving it to Parker's, which is better spaced. So from an engineering standpoint, it would make sense to address both signals should we move forward with the project. So if that helps answer
Is this kind of like a mini access plan?
Well,
yeah, so intersection?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to look at it, there's three signals. There's the existing signal, there's Parker signal, and then beyond that is the Bluffton Parkway South signal. So it could be its own mini access management plan.
Okay. Joe?
Yes, several questions. Question number one, has the town of Bluffton taken an official action as to the preferred alternative that they would like to see?
Official as in a resolution, no, but as far as direct comment to me, that was their preferred was what I described in option E. With all of those, they like all of the access management. They understand that it may not be accomplished in one phased project, but that is their preferred option.
So there's no official action by them as yet.
Correct.
Question number two, have we evaluated the cost of each of these options?
We have not. So obviously they each grow, and I know cost is a factor in any decision. I think a good base for the option A, which is the least of the projects, is in that $2.5 million range, and we'll have to fine tune that. But until we have any more clarity as far as other ones, it wasn't a worthwhile consideration at the time.
So we assume that they're eventually going to take an action that prefers option 5. We don't know what it costs as yet. Next, with all of those roads that are being required in this, will we now have to do another environmental assessment?
Yeah, we're going to have to do another environmental permit regardless. So a permit and assessment are two different things. So we did an environmental assessment process, NEPA process, similar to what's being done in 278 for the entire 5B. That is now 13 years old. So what was done back then is, even though we have a fully approved NEPA document, that is going to be outdated and it's going to be required to be updated. So
okay, so last question is, looking at the preferred alternative, there are several residential roads that are being created, correct?
Access roads, correct.
Yes. So we're going to be using county dollars to create residential roads.
There could be, yes. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Other comments?
Mr. Chairman?
York?
Yes. Help me make sure I understand, Jared. You kind of alluded to 5B. And if I look at E, 5B is outlined in E.
Correct.
but it doesn't go all the way.
So 5B, what was additionally initially described in 5B is from where we're starting off at Independence all the way to Buck Island, so 2.5 miles. So option E is almost about 1.5 miles, so it's about halfway. But it does not, option E, as described by the town, does not connect to Buck Island, the full 5B.
Now, what kind of comment have we received from the community there about the proposed 5B? Are they supportive of 5B or they do not want 5B?
I think Mr. Councilman Cunningham might be the best to,
Okay.
because this gets into our meeting on Thursday. So, and Councilman Cunningham, maybe you can set the stage a little bit better, but at the meeting, I don't know exactly how many were there, over 100. And the majority of them were from 3 neighborhoods, from Woodbridge, the Towns, and Rose Hill. So Councilman Cunningham, if you could maybe address some of that.
Yeah, before I address that, because I do have some comments I want to make myself, is there anybody else that wants to ask Jared any questions or anything along those lines?
Yeah, if I could, real quick.
I just think it's just more beneficial to do it that way.
Okay,
And then I'll answer
Brian and then Mark.
Thank you, Jared. Of all the roads that you are talking about building, Joe had pointed out that there are residential roads. They're all actually within the town limits of the town of Bluffton also, correct?
That's correct.
So every town road. And I'd like to point out to everybody that we already have a problem with roads, maintenance of roads inside of the municipalities, and the municipalities not, according to state law, not taking their responsibility seriously about maintaining the roads. So we're here advocating or discussing building more roads within town limits.
Mark?
Yeah, again, thank you. I caught everything you said on Thursday and again today, and still there's questions I've got when I look at all this. I guess the biggest question that comes up is, obviously we look back now as county councilmen and say, well, why didn't we do that to begin with? And obviously it's lining up the road. So if nothing is done, if no realignment happens, in your best guess, because I know it's a guess, and I appreciate you saying before that I never realized traffic and transportation are 2 different things. Absolutely. So obviously with traffic now, if we do nothing, what happens to that stretch of road with traffic between the 2 Bluffton parkways, the BP squared or whatever you call it, BP2s, whatever you said? Is that something that ends up being 8 lanes between there eventually, or there's crossovers, or there's flyovers, or?
So just congestion. So unless you do anything proactively, basically in transportation and traffic, you're kind of chicken or egg type situation. Do you build it and then people come, or growth comes, or do you let growth drive the transportation project that's needed? So it's kind of that scenario. I mean, you can either sit back and wait and then you'd be forced to do some type of improvement when congestion meets and people can't take it any longer. Or is there a proactive approach to manage that congestion? So, and that's what an access management study is. It's just a proactive approach to manage a corridor that hopefully can complement the growth in the area. So you either plan for appropriate growth or you react to growth, and sometimes it's more costly venture, because then you've got developed properties and the real estate's more and right-of-way acquisition, or you don't have as much flexibility. So the sooner you do improvements in areas of growth, the more opportunity you have to do a smaller, easier project than later, more expensive, more challenging, more project. But whether it's 8 lanes or whether it's a flyover, I don't see any of that. I just see massive congestion that would need some type of remedy later. And that could be not just between the 2 Bluffton parkways, but through the whole corridor. If we don't implement the access management updates as well.
Just before
one final comment before Logan starts. The phasing, there isn't enough money. So how do we pay for this? Whether it's phase 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, it eventually has to be paid for. Where do we get that money?
So that's an appropriate point. So right now we have $2.5 million prescribed out of impact fees. If we had a $10 million project, we don't have that amount of impact fees in the impact fee account. So other road funding sources, local road, this is not a DOT road, this is a local road. So local funding sources would be impact fees, sales tax, CTC, or opportunity for grants or other partners. Those are common funding sources.
Is any of this eligible for federal funding?
Potentially, the way you get it eligible for federal funding is go through the entire NEPA process. So that's how it was initially set up with the entire 5B. And then it has to get on the LATS tip such that it can get on the state STIP, which is the Transportation Improvement Plan. And not until then can you raise your hand for federal funding. So it could be available for federal funding, but we would have to do certain processes to ensure that if we short circuit any of those processes, i.e. the NEPA process, then we can pretty much guarantee that there's not a federal funding opportunity.
And all of those access roads, which are residential streets, could be potentially covered by federal funding?
Potentially. So if you compare this to 278, and it started with 19 alternatives, then it went to 6, and then it went to 1. And in that, there was spaghetti models and there was roads everywhere. So this is basically the spaghetti model right now, where roads everywhere. So once we whittle it down to some project, then that's the preferred alternative, which may or may not include some or all of the access roads. Now, from a federal funding, it would be a much more attractive project from a federal if it's actually a destination versus just an intersection. And then the access roads would also be more attractive associated with a corridor project versus intersection. So right now, in moving just the intersection, we're having to create access roads because we're creating an adverse impact specifically on one subdivision. You could not do any access improvements and just provide a right in, right out, or the left in, no left out option, the U-turn option. But there could be a chance that the subdivision could claim some adverse impacts to the project. So you could do limited access roads, but you stand a little bit liable for other options later, other liabilities.
So,
Thank you.
So as I turn this over to Logan, let me weigh in on one concept. It has always seemed to me that the 5B is a tough decision at some point in time, and that we're not going to do anything unless in some form out of LATS it shows up in the long-range plans of what we need, and we know the permitting would have to be done again and everything. So that kind of says to me the fifth alternative that essentially puts in half of 5B, it would be a non-starter because it's basically the camel nose under the net tent. So it seems to me in reality you're back to your original 4, and it sounds to me like that's kind of a mini access type of thing. But at some point it's important to us to at least put on paper what we think is the proper solution, and then people can work off of it. So Logan?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. First, Jared, awesome job. I know you've had a long week talking on this project and getting everything ready and doing a lot of stuff in this meeting. So thank you for that and keeping me informed and updating me. One, this is a mess. This whole project is a mess for multiple different reasons, for historical reasons, for transportation reasons, congestion reasons. To talk first about Mr. Glover's question, reaction from the communities. Yeah, it has not been perceived well, especially by the towns, which is the one that's losing the intersection at the stop, and it makes totally sense why they would be, upset about that. Granted, they are the only neighborhood right now that has a light access in. I get that. They purchased it when it was like that as well. I will comment on one thing with that. Somebody screenshotted me a post that I called it apartment complex. I apologize for that if I did. If I misspoke once in 2.5 hours, though, I'll take that as a win. So I do apologize for that. I know it's not an apartment complex. I've helped multiple people move into that neighborhood. Secondly, the problem I'm going to run into with this project is, and anybody's going to make the same argument, is the moment we do this realignment, it will always keep open that possibility for 5B. I'm not saying I'm willing to shut down that project for the next 30 years. I do not think it's a project we need now. That's my personal belief. I said I would not support a project that allows 5B when I ran, and I'm going to continue to stand against that part. I don't see how us on county in this meeting, or if somebody tries to move this to council at the end of this topic, how we can move forward without having more conversation with the town. The options we've presented to them obviously has not boded well. This intersection seems like a very small movement, on paper, but it will impact thousands. From Woodbridge, Rose Hill, the towns, Pinecrest, Shell Hall. If you look at those options, it runs right through the back of those neighborhoods too. This isn't just the intersection. Depending on how far you go, it goes right through those neighborhoods. It's also been expressed to us that, that last option with the entrance to Woodbridge wants nothing to do with it. So we could put the road there and they don't even want to tap into it. So we're sitting at a dead end that can't even go into the neighborhood. We just did an update access management plan that's actually giving Woodbridge a light. So that should help them with some of their traffic flow already. So really they have no reason to even want to tap into this potential future road. And on the other side, it does help a neighborhood like Shell Hall because you now move the light closer to us. We're never going to get a light over in Shell Hall. That's where I live. That's the reality because we're close to another light already getting in front of Hampton Hall. It helps them when that light gets closer towards Cross. But at the same time, you're hurting other neighborhoods. The one part of this that makes the most sense to me, that today, the only part that I could really move forward and support today is that area over on Innovation Drive to connect that neighborhood, which is the Willows, Sandy Point, Edgefield, and that Arbor. And there's another neighborhood that they're building right now too. That part makes sense. We already have an easement agreement on that property. I don't know if it is a light or if maybe it's just a right turn to alleviate traffic. That's obviously a whole lot of discussion. I don't think we're ready to move this project forward to county council. We have way too many questions, whether it's funding, which option do we want to take? We already know how most of the community feels. And I said this in the meeting, and I'll say it again to you guys that weren't able to make it. Just because people show up to a meeting doesn't mean everybody opposes it. I know that there's people that want these realignments to happen. I've received emails. There's also people that aren't for it. But I think we have to have more conversations. I can't support anything until we go back to the towns and have a meeting with them and present them with options. I mean, and maybe nothing gets done with an agreement on us, and maybe it comes to a point where, we have to move forward or not move forward. I can't answer that because we haven't had the meeting. But I think it would be wrong for us to move forward today to send this to county council with the amount of questions we have on our side, and not having another conversation with the town. That I think they're the ones that are most impacted by this. Woodbridge is just not going to tap in, and they're not going to worry about being affected by it because they're not going to tap into the road. Rose Hill is definitely not going to tap in on the backside. Willow Run has nothing to do with our project. That's an agreement with the town of Bluffton and whoever buys that property. That is not a fight that we're in. That is their agreement that they came up with. For these that don't know, Willow Run is that where they wanted to tap in on that very end. There's an agreement on that property. Whoever purchased it has to put that road in. Again, that's not the county's job, but that is the town of Bluffton, which I live in. But that's something I think they're going to have to. This was done at the direction of Mark Orlando by his letter to bring this up. Some people talked about it for the hospital. I honestly had those questions too before Jared and I started talking of what even brought this up. So I am going to move that we remove this from the agenda today to not move it to county council because I think there's way too many questions on that. I think our team has done a great job getting this to us. Jared was directed by our previous administrator to start this project. I know he has put a ton of time in on this project. I think one day in the future, this could be the project, especially when we talk about exit 3. But just the same arguments we're having right now, Mr. Passaman's going to have those discussions come his way when they want to take that road right behind Sun City. That's what the next discussion is going to be, because that's the ultimate goal when this is done, to take this Bluffton Parkway from Hilton Head all the way down to 95. So there are a lot of questions, a lot of challenges. I'll put that motion on the floor if it's even possible, Mr. Chairman, to even make that motion. I'm not sure.
I think in terms of path forward, I mean, I don't sense there's any desire to vote on something today and take it forward. Just thinking out loud with you, it sounds to me like earlier we approved an amendment to an existing access management plan, which was north of Buckwalter, north of Bluffton Parkway on Buckwalter. Seems to me what we have now is the corresponding piece of that says we probably have an access management someplace that's in existence, and do we want to also amend it? Because we're not committing anything. All we're doing is putting on paper what we think is the best path forward for consideration in the future, which is always, I think, a good thing to do. Am I missing something in that? Okay. So would anybody disagree with that we're maybe at the position of looking at the existing plan and then having a recommendation as to whether we change it or don't change it, and reacting to whatever staff thinks?
Yeah, I kind of do, Stu, have a little problem with it. I think what we really need to do, because of all the logistics involved here and the various political ramifications, the need for approval by other jurisdictions, and questions to be answered on multiple levels, we really don't need to do any more. I mean, we have existing lights. There's no need to change anything at this point without direction and requests and cooperation from the town of Bluffton, again, on multiple levels. And, so what we really need to do is just remove staff's efforts in this and just put it on a shelf for a while and see what the town of Bluffton decides it wants to do regarding taking its responsibility for its own internal road structure and how they're going to pay for it, whether they're going to, and we'd be happy to cooperate. I'm sure that impact fee money is partially the county's. And so, and of course, any changes here have ramifications throughout our transportation system. And so, clearly we would want to cooperate on some level with the internal road structure of the town of Bluffton. But we need their cooperation on this and other matters. And so we really need to just let staff do other things that we need them to do and focus on issues that deal with the county.
Mr. Chairman.
York?
I agree with what Brian is saying. However, I don't want to put it on the shelf. I don't like that terminology, Brian, putting it on the shelf. I think we need to be planning for traffic in Bluffton and Hilton Head. I mean, that's a given. Traffic is not going to go away. And to me, the 5B serves a purpose of moving traffic. Now, whether it goes lateral into communities, I don't think that should be our concern at this time, but we need to move traffic, and connecting that Bluffton Parkway with 5B going out, whether it goes wherever, right now it's going on 170, is moving traffic. And I think we should at least take the ball and put it on Bluffton's court. Don't leave it on our shelves. Put it on their court and say, this is where we are, and it's on you right now to tell us what you want to do and work together with us as partners in moving this thing forward. That's where I want to be, Brian. I don't want to leave something on the shelf, on our shelf, and it's in our court. I want to put it in their hands for them to take action.
So does this, to wrap this up, does this lend itself basically to staff, talking to Bluffton, to see what they want to do, and at this point in time?
We know what Bluffton wants to do.
Which
They want us to spend money to build a road to extend 5B to the backside of Rose Hill plantation, so they can trigger a provision in a development agreement to require a developer to build another connector road down the side of Rose Hill from 278 into the new 5B. That is what we're all dancing around here this evening to try to get to. That's what they want out of the deal. And until we do that, this issue is not going away. So to Councilman Flewellen's point, to Councilman Logan Cunningham's point, I, as a county administrator, would recommend to you all that you not do anything with this project. If anybody does anything with the project, you ought to tell Bluffton, hey, this is your transportation issue. This is your development agreement. You go spend your staff resources. You go spend your engineering dollars to put together a plan that brings back a funding mechanism for us. You get it approved through the communities. The county's not going to dedicate any more resources to doing anything with the intersection realignment or the construction of 5B, and send that message to them. And to Councilmember Flewellen's other point, and by the way, when you all are ready to cooperate on some other things, we'll be glad to sit down with you and talk about a path forward once you have a plan for transportation in this area that we can all assist on. But you all need to dedicate your resources and your money to doing additional studies with 5B and the intersection realignment.
I thought that's what I said.
So, does anybody disagree with what the administrator
I like
said?
that, Eric.
That's why we hired him, York. That's why we hired him right there.
Well, I think that's probably the consensus of the group of what ought to happen next, but some serious conversations with the town of Bluffton going forward. So, okay, we're running long. I'm going to skip the objectives piece. We were going to talk about the facilities master plan. We might just take a couple of minutes
I can
and
give a 2-minute update on
give a
that.
2-minute update, and I'll have a comment, and I want for York to make a
So
comment.
just as it was presented previously a couple months ago, so staff's direction is to start working on developing kind of a plan or a priority, a plan of attack. So we are doing that. We're trying to figure out what pieces are relatively easy, simple, straightforward, and come together at council, most likely either at retreat or at the PSC in November, and come together and say, okay, here's a 3-year kind of look ahead. We could see doing this project, this project, and this project. There's also a couple of projects, bigger projects that need more council direction and attention, i.e. the whole campus and the law enforcement center, and how those big components fit together such that we can develop a long-term plan. But until that's discussed more fully by council, all we really have the ability to is to come up with a short-term plan for some of the smaller, more straightforward projects, and that's what we're working on.
And building on that, I see probably a need to take the plan that was put forward and accept it in some form, because it's going to be a roadmap for a long period of time. But there are a couple of items that are worth debating, to your point, that may, while we're at it, would be good for us to weigh in on. And I asked York if he would help spearhead that discussion. And I think over the next 2 or 3 PFCs, that may be a logical discussion to have. And so we tie a ribbon around the report, but we may ask the consultants to change a few pieces, or we may accept it just the way it is.
I would recommend you, Mr. Chairman, if you would consider adding this as an item to one of your hours of your 2-hour retreat session for us to thoroughly go through it and get recommendations from council as part of the public facilities portion of the upcoming retreat over November 3rd, 4th, and 5th.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
York, you have any comments?
No, what I would do is I would get with Jared, and then we move forward and put framework for what Mr. Greenway just outlined.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, good. We've exhausted our meeting.
Sorry, it wasn't mean to be long-winded.
Everybody wants to stay longer, you're welcome to, but the rest of us are adjourning.
That's it?
That's it. Either that or we have to extend beyond the 6 o'clock hour.
Oh, no.
I think you would vote against that.
Joe, I almost asked you to move number 17 to the front. So I have to hang out with you this long.
Well, it was very clear what we have to do and why we have to do it the way we have to do it. It is not our job to solve some other